Hey, Steve Magnante here at High Octane Classics in Auburn, Massachusetts with another high octane walk around. This time we're talking about a 1987 Buick Regal, but not just any Regal. A lot of Regals, were rear-wheel drive grandma mobiles, the limiteds, etc. Well, this is a turbocharged Regal. In fact, it's a T. What that means, of course, is turbo power. The hood has the 3.8 SFI turbo dome. This is one of those mean and nasty Grand National powered Regals. Now, we can't call this one a Grand National. Remember, of course, the Grand National was always black, very sinister. Darth Vader, your car is ready. Well, some folks don't know that you can get the same drivetrain in a non-Grand National, and voila, we have it here, the Regal Turbo T. Keep in mind, though, the T package could be had in '87 with the Oldsmobile 307 V8, not a turbo. So when you see a T, it doesn't necessarily mean turbo. Those are rare, but more often than not, the T leads to this. This, of course, is the domed hood. And again, 3.8 is the liters, 231 cubic inches. SFI, sequential fuel injection, and turbo speaks for itself. Crazy thing, that 3.8 liter V6 is a Buick engine that first launched in 1961 as 196 or 225 cubic inches. Was made in Flint, Michigan for Buicks until about 1966. And then Buick General Motors sold the V6 tooling to Kaiser Jeep, who used it in Jeeps through about 1971 or 2. Crazy but true. GM bought back the 3.8 liter or the V6 production equipment, restated it, and by 1975 was making V6 powered Buicks to beat the fuel crisis. So it's kind of weird. The V6 Buick engine was used by Jeep and in fact owned by Jeep Kaiser for a bunch of years before GM bought it back. But again, the best 3.8s or the best V6s are the ones here from 1977 on with even fire cranks. But again, 86 and 87, the only 2 years, sequential fuel injection, intercooler, 235 horsepower. These things are animals. Now again, this one with the T package has the aluminum wheels versus steel wheels with wire hubcaps on the limited Grandma Mobile. But again, these are lightweight wheels. In fact, these aluminum wheels used on the T's are lighter than the chrome-plated steel wheels that were used on Grand Nationals. So these are actually the wheel you want if you want the lowest mass between the tire and the vehicle. Now this one is not a T-top, which is kind of okay. T-tops are cool. They were an option, glass panels that came off. The only downside is they tended to have cracks and leaks. So the hard tops with the solid roof are perhaps preferred depending on your desires. I'll take it any day. Now this one here does not have the ducktail spoiler, which is something seen on Grand Nationals, but from the rear, SFI turbo means don't mess around with me unless you're, well, I don't know, an older muscle car, because again, the Buick Grand National and turbos could pretty much dispatch a 5-liter Mustang or an IROC-C without too much trouble at the drag strip. As far as handling goes, these were very capable cars, but an IROC-Z with the 16-inch wheels, Goodyear Gatorback tires would probably outhandle one of these, because after all, these were body-on-frame cars with 4-wheel coil spring suspension, big sway bars, but again, these were kind of boulevard cars, whereas the IROC-C was, well, almost a road racer right off the showroom floor. But if you wanted a mean muscle car from the 1980s, it didn't get much meaner than a turbocharged Buick. Let's look under the hood. Before we expose potentially the mightiest muscle engine of the 1980s, we have to look below the front bumper. Now we see here there's an air dam, okay? But there's a gap in the middle. What's up with this? How come it's not all the way across? Well, this gap appeared in 86 and 87 to allow air to flow into the intercooler, which again was added in 86 and 87. And what's an intercooler do? Well, there's that mighty 3.8 liter V6, and that thing right there, this is basically an air-to-air heat exchanger. That's the intercooler. The air comes up from underneath, blows through this box, and essentially what the intercooler does, it takes the compressed intake charge after the turbo's done with it and cools it off a little bit to make it denser than it already is with the 10 psi of boost. So the intercooler actually helps to prevent detonation, allows the use of lesser fuels, not race gas, and adds extra power. So the intercooler, again, you see that gap under the front bumper of a Regal. It's an 86 or an 87, and if you're not driving an IROC-C with a 5.7, you don't have a chance. Corvette, yeah, you'd be all right with one of these things, but that gap spelled trouble for 5-liter drivers back in the 1980s. Now here we are. This is the V6. It's a short engine. It's not a V8, but again, the turbocharger right here makes this little 231 behave like a 400 when it's under full boost. But the beauty, of course, is that when you're just puttering around out of boost, it behaves like a little 3.8-liter six-cylinder, gives you 21 miles to the gallon, something like that, if you're not getting on it. So it kind of gives you your cake, and you get to eat it too. Like all Buick turbo cars, this one does have air conditioning. You couldn't get them without AC. And they have a unique suitcase right here with the word turbo on the sticker. And all of this is present and accounted for. Naturally, power brakes, power steering, and something you'll see, because the turbo engine didn't make a lot of vacuum and idle. These have an electric vacuum pump underneath the master cylinder right here, which crutches vacuum so that when you come to a stop and you're idling, you have plenty of vacuum to operate the front power disc brakes. But again, this is 235 horsepower, about 330 foot-pounds of torque, which is 30 foot-pounds more than the 5-liter Mustang, which of course was a pretty potent engine, 225 horsepower, 300 foot-pounds. But again, this little 231 will run rings around a 5.0 in the drag strip. These will go a high 13 with slicks, whereas a 5-liter Mustang probably a high 14 with slicks, both of them bone stock. But again, traction is the key with these cars. Okay, we've seen under the hood. Let's now look inside. Inside, the T Regal has bucket seats, beautifully covered in velour, no leather here. Again, this is more about luxury and performance, but the T does have this aluminum spoked steering wheel with a fat grip, tilt column, pretty much standard equipment. And in the instrument panel, it's interesting to see the 85-mile-an-hour joke, wink, wink speedometer. The tachometer down here, which redlines at about 5,000 RPM. Again, the 3.8 turbo, we can see the emblem right here, does not want to go to 7 grand like a small block Chevy hot rod engine, but rather makes all its torque down low, so it lives a long, healthy life as a pretty much under-stressed V6 engine to deliver the power when the boost comes on. This one, of course, has the center console, and we hear 1-2 drive overdrive. Yep, this is the Turbo 200 4-speed automatic transmission under the console here. The original radio is still in place. This is a Delco. This is the upscale cassette radio. Remember, of course, cassette tapes long before CDs or Bluetooth. You put your cassette in here, your Flock of Seagulls, your Duran Duran, your Gloria Estefan, you choose it. It goes right in there. You can hear your great music. Air conditioning, of course. And this one's kind of cool. The owner's manual is still present, but when you got it in a turbo, you got this. This is the bag that it came in. T-Type, a boost of Buick performance. And inside of this, of course, they cover all of the different Buicks, including the turbos, you know, kind of a cool thing. So right here, all your information on your Goodyear Gatorback tire, your warranty from the factory, even the Delco, how to use your radio. So kind of cool. The original paperwork still with this one. And yeah, really great example. The blue and blue, very tasteful. And again, you got to remember that, you know, Grand Nationals were generally black. Darth Vader, your car is ready. But these Turbo Ts and T-types could be had in several colors. And again, the dark blue like this is very regal, very elegant looking, very tasteful, and yet kind of sinister at the same time. Let's look inside the trunk. What a lot of people liked about the Regal was that it was still, you know, a traditional American sedan with a large trunk. By contrast, a 5-liter Mustang sedan had a pretty small deck lid and a smaller trunk compartment, whereas on these Regals, well, plenty of room for all your luggage and lots of goodies inside. This one is very well preserved, and this even has the original temporary spare, which is, I believe, a 16-inch diameter affair. And the punch line here is that the diameter of this is as large as the stock wheel and tire combination. The reason is, if you have a smaller spare tire, you can get some weird handling if that's up front. And at the back of the car, if you ever put a shorter tire on one side of the differential and a taller one on the other one, you can munch up your posi unit. Speaking of which, posi traction axles were not standard in turbo cars. You have to look up here on the tag and look for G80 and EFG. Where's G80? There it is, G80 right there. This was factory equipped with a limited slip or posi traction rear axle in the 8.5-inch ring gear differential. So again, all the more reason to have the same size spare tire on the right or left-hand side of that axle, because if you don't have that, again, the clutches and the posi get burned up, and it's not as effective. Not a nice thing to do to your Turbo Regal Buick. But again, the beauty of this one here is it doesn't have the vinyl top. You know, it kind of has the sinister look of a Grand National, but probably without the insurance surcharge. You know, back in the day, starting in the early 70s, insurance companies would charge you more for muscle cars, and I would be willing to guess that a Grand National owner would pay more for insurance than would a Regal T. Not a whole lot of difference, but it added up. So that's the story of how Buick came up with a V6 engine in the early 60s for use in the Skylark compact car, sold that same engine to Jeep in the mid-60s up to the early 70s, bought the tooling back from Jeep in 1975, and then brought the V6 back as an economy engine from 75 onward. But again, as we get into 86, 87, the final 2 years for the rear-wheel drive car, these were Mustang killers thanks to that turbocharged, intercooled engine. Just goes to show that big things can come in smaller packages.